we are in a world of change. I think we should make the most of this opportunity to make sure that the changes that have been imposed on us are for the better, and that we can move forward from here in a positive way. So, which is another reason why we can all support each other in that. We've been looking at the World Economic Forum because I think education, I mean, I'm probably being a bit, controversial, but I think it was a bit stuck in the rut in the UK, and the way we taught, what we taught, hadn't really caught up with society and the world around us. Were we preparing children for the future? Were we preparing them for 2025, 26, 30? The world of work out there is different. So the skills we teach them and how we teach them has been forced to change now, and I think there's some good things there. So we need to sort of review what it is they need to know about being global citizens, the skills children need now, and how they learn those skills. So a lot of our sort of vision has been based on thinking about this, reflecting on this, and creating a world of opportunity, sharing ideas and opportunities so that we can all work together to make it a better opportunity. So in the UK, we have cultural capital as part of the curriculum. It's inspected by Ofsted, and we have a curriculum called SMSC, which is spiritual, moral, cultural, and emotional. So it's basically looking at the whole child. And cultural capital is sort of knowledges and skills, behaviours that we're trying to give children now, that they can draw upon to be successful in the world of work and society, in their life in general. So it's not just knowledge we're imparting now. It's because I think, especially in this world of interconnectedness and the press of a button on your phone, you can find information. It's what you do with that. It's the skills to be able to access that and enable yourself to use them. So we're looking about giving students power, looking about social mobility, showing them the opportunities that are out there in the world, because it is such a small place now, giving them the assets to achieve, regardless of where they start from. So we're looking at calling it a global school and global capital. And the sort of points that I would consider a school to be considered a global school is that you are providing those assets, those opportunities to develop cultural capital for the students, for personal development of staff, and it has to be for management and leadership. It's great. We have some amazing teachers out there that are really inspirational, but without the support of your school and backup of the management, have it sort of in a plan, school development plan, or as an international plan, a vision, it doesn't happen, does it? It needs to be a vision that is shared by your leadership and all your other colleagues to make these things happen, to make sure that you have the opportunities in multiculturalism, the diversity within the curriculum. Basically, the international dimensions is what we're trying to promote, and to support you to do that. So it's like I say, you need a vision. If you don't know what you want to provide and have that in a plan, it doesn't happen, does it? So it's deciding what your vision is, which is we're trying to provide a vision here, and how to impact it, how to actually make it work, embed it within the school curriculum to make it a possibility so the students can actually access it. So having a policy that has global dimensions prepares students for life. Working like, that's what's great about the Global School Alliance, is that you can contact and be in collaboration with schools all around the world for ideas, for support, what would work, what wouldn't, and to get to know other cultures. So having partners and links like this is ultimately the best support you can get, so that they can see the different types of cultures around the world. And what we're trying to do is provide these opportunities through the Global School Alliance, which I can explain a bit more. We're sort of a roadmap, and we've set up the Global School Alliance initially was just an online community. We've now integrated our online platform so that you can collaborate and communicate, do joint projects better, and actually have better communications. Initially, it was just a Facebook page, newsletters, and these conferences. But we want all the members to work together to develop this into something that's useful and beneficial for everybody. So now that we've got the platform, get involved. You should all be, if you're members or not yet members, get on there. Start populating it, sharing ideas, talking to each other, doing some fantastic projects. We'll get some templates together, but we want your input in this as well. So we're trying to provide a framework, an idea of how to become a gold award, gold global school. So having a sort of an award system is just like a roadmap to give you a guideline. And obviously, teachers are always so hardworking, but always put on a bit. So having so many extra responsibilities, we think you should be recognised. To get this to happen in the school, does need to be a recognised coordinator, some sort of international person who wears that hat but is recognised and awarded for it, because it doesn't just happen. There has to be somebody who sort of steers this. So we want to give you recognition as well. So the school can brag about what it's providing, get some awards, and some logos and certificates, which everyone loves. But the teachers also get recognition. Could be part of your CPD. It looks good on your certificate. You've worked with schools around the world. You've done joint projects. You've done, international opportunities, which look good for you as well, and to be seen to do that. So we've developed this global school awards scheme. The bronze, we want to make this as accessible as possible, because basically it's the kind of thing we'll want to do. And to get your foot on the ladder, the Bronze School Award is the basics, basically. It's having a person who's designated a coordinator, providing just assemblies, displays, talking about international days, cultural celebrations. I think it's the sort of thing that most schools do already. Even just celebrate Christmas, or you look at Eid, any sort of those sort of international days. Join a group like this. Doesn't have to be Global School Alliance. There are other member groups out there you can be as part of as well. We don't want to be exclusive. We want to enhance all the other relationships out there and complement everything that's out there. So be members of as many groups as possible. Attend conferences like this. We've tried to provide as many opportunities to develop ideas online, because at the moment everything's online, unfortunately. And have a policy, have a vision, have a plan, because if you haven't got a plan and a target, things don't happen. So that's the basic. Well, you can get that certification almost now, I should imagine most people. Provide us with a bit of evidence of that. And we then sort of leading on from that is becoming more active, getting students participating more actively. So our silver level is being more involved in the platform, on our Global School Alliance platform, getting some virtual partnerships, start doing some projects, either choose your own, find a template we've got, video pals. There's loads of opportunities you can do with other schools online. We can provide training to help you do that, or you can do it yourself. We're there to support you as much or as little as you want us to do. And we consider the gold level is when it's more active. Once we can get travel moving, to me, you can't beat traveling around the world, meeting peers from different cultures, hosting them within your school, which makes you celebrate your own school as well. So this actual movement around the world, which fingers crossed will happen next year soon, is the ultimate experience we're aiming for. So a gold school, global school would be actively having statistical partnerships, sending students and staff around the world to learn about other cultures, bring them into your school, and being a little bit more physically active. So that's a kind of roadmap for engagement and interaction with these sort of activities and opportunities, and we want to help provide that with our platform and the Global School Alliance. So you can apply for that any level. We've got a scorecard, self-assessment that you can do to assess yourselves and apply for that almost immediately. And again, like I said, the international coordinator needs to be recognised. So many teachers put in so much work, and teachers, parents, pupils, they don't realise the amount of work involved in just putting on, watching a video, going to a trip just outside your school, let alone to another side of the world. The amount of work that goes into this. So recognition for that. Be a recognised expert international coordinator. We can get you certificated for that. So we're talking about realising this world of opportunity now and supporting you to do that. The recognition, the Global School Awards as a roadmap. I'm happy to have one-to-one calls. In fact, I like it because I like to know, as you can probably tell, I do like interacting with people, getting to know you, finding out how I can support you. So one-to-one calls anytime. We can talk about what your school's already doing, what you want to do, how we can help you do that. We're great at signposting. Currently, there's very little funding out there, but whenever there is funding, we'll signpost it. We used to find there's a lot of British Council money for Erasmus Plus and that sort of thing, but with the UK having left with Brexit, that's not available anymore. So anytime we find opportunities, we share that with our members too, signpost as much as we can what's happening and what would be good for you. You can try your self-assessment. If you go to the website, there's a self-assessment form there to gauge where your school's up to, what you're providing already, and next steps, so you could always get Bronze Award. And like I say, start your journey, join us for that. So that is basically what's the Global School Alliances can provide. On the platform, we've still got, because China has been our focus and is always going to be one of our favourite places, we've got quite a lot of online programmes that you can do to engage with China, and we want to develop this for other countries. So there's Mandarin language lessons, there's just day workshops on Chinese culture activities, and we've just done an amazing online immersion. I couldn't send all my lovely students over to China to have this experience, so I did an online one as close as I could. This one was based in Chengdu. We had a lovely girl, Rachel, who was our host in Chengdu, who basically welcomed, we had 350 students from the UK, from about 5 or 6 different schools, all engaging in cultural activities online with them, to have this one-to-one experience. We had live engagement activities with peers in China, and it was amazing. So my delightful Hannah there has put together this little video to show you the sort of experiences, but this is a China one. I'd like to develop it for everything, but just to give you an idea of the sort of things we can do and support you with doing, to create our amazing global citizens and global education out there and support each other. So if James, would you like to share this wonderful video with people? Thank you. I'll stop sharing so you can do that. There's no sound, James.
You're on mute, James.
I beg your pardon. I'll try take two.
Hello everyone, my name is Frida. Hi, my name is Shanice. Oh, my name is Sunny. Hi, my name is Karen. Oh, I'm Elsa. My name is Ellen. My name is Hugo. What is your favorite food? My favorite food is Chinese New Year.
Welcome to our school.
Welcome to our school. Welcome to our school. And happy Chinese New Year. And happy Chinese New Year.
Thanks, James. Don't you just love those happy faces? Those are the sort of experiences I want everyone to have, you know, to share cultures, to find out about each other, and you just can't beat that, can you? So, I mean, I know this this conference today is about behaviour, but I think personally maybe that getting students engaged affects their behaviour. If they enjoy what they're doing and they're learning in a way that they enjoy, are engaged with, are actually in control of a little bit, it definitely will help the behaviour. So that's my take on today's theme. But obviously join the Global School Alliance and take the most of it, and I'm looking forward to working with as many of you as possible. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. That was absolutely fabulous. Really fantastic. I agree. The photo's fantastic. Oh, I'm going back for more. Here we go. So I'm going to unshare my screen and we hand over to Alina. Alina, would you like to share your screen?
I would, yeah. Here we are. Can you see?
Yeah, that's great, Alina. Thank you.
So I'll make a start. So I'm Elena Diaz. I'm a head of MFL. I'm also a consultant and an author, and I have 18 years in the classroom. So lots and lots of experience in different settings. I've worked in outstanding schools. I've worked in single-sex schools. I'm currently working in a comprehensive in beautiful Northumberland, in the north of England, and it is very, very comprehensive. So behaviour is part of our day, and even though our children are absolutely wonderful, they do need our help sometimes, you know, to get the most of their lessons. We've got some of our lovely children, and a picture of our school. So we have fantastic children, fantastic staff. But many of them come from deprived backgrounds. So yeah, we've had I've had experience of working with lots and lots of children. One of my roles currently is to be a lead behaviour teacher for MFL across NELT, which is our family of schools. And I'm always very much in touch with the research that's around. I always like to make sure that I'm very, very practical. Especially when I'm talking about things like behaviour, that I'm able to provide practical ideas on how to solve, you know, issues in the classroom and prevent them. But also I want these to be quite rooted in research. So I've done a little bit of research for us today, just to show you how behaviour is impacting the teachers first. So this is a little bit of research from TeacherTap. I don't know if you're familiar with TeacherTap, but it's a brilliant app that creates a lot of research for us teachers. And this is just to summarize this for you. Behavior is one of the most important aspects for teachers when they're thinking about choosing a school. They value good behavior, impeccable behavior, more than the hours that they have to work. So you'll know it yourself. Also, I've had a look at the Teacher Wellbeing Index, which is a report that gets published every year. It's been published since 2017, and it's been looking at how teachers have been feeling and how they've been coping with stress. And the last year has been very, very interesting. Teachers' stress has gone up considerably, and there's lots of indicators that show this. But when we're looking at what causes stress for teachers, if I just show you what you've got in front of you, work-life balance is very high up. In having loads more work this year has cost us a lot of stress. But pupil behaviour, if you have a look, ranks 4th on every aspect that causes us stress. So getting behaviour right is really, really important. When I talk about behaviour and when I think about behaviour, I think it's really, really important that most of my effort as a teacher goes towards preventing bad behaviour rather than dealing with it. I don't really want to deal with it. I want to prevent it, and I do it in lots of different ways. And one of them is creating an engaging atmosphere for students and providing them, especially in MFL, with a global education and bringing the world to the classroom, and that makes a big impact when it comes to behaviour. And excellent planning, lesson planning is crucial. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty of behaviour, there are some things that are really going to help, and some techniques that have been really useful for me and for lots of other teachers that I've trained. So as I was mentioning before, I do actually base a lot of my practice on research. So I wanted to recommend to you, if you are after some research to do with behaviour, the Improving Behaviour in Schools guidance report by the EEF. It's a fantastic read. And I've got a little summary that you can download from the EEF website with what the EEF recommend are the 6 steps to achieving good behaviour in schools. Now, some of these steps are to do with leadership and management, but some of these we can explore and think about practical ways in which we can use them in the classroom. And that's what I'm going to do today very, very quickly. So one of the recommendations is to know and understand your pupils and their influences. And you can have a read at the detail later, but there are a few ways in which I do this in the classroom. So I have context sheets. These are sheets that I have next to me when I'm planning. That's the time when I use them the most. And context sheets have all the information I have about my students in one page. They're very, very important. I maintain them 3 times a year. So they're updated 3 times a year with new data and any other changes that there may have been in their circumstances. I make sure I also maintain annotated seating plans where crucial information about the students would be just annotated with maybe just a letter or 2 and like code for them. And you may have annotated things like ability or a special need or anything that you really need to remember when you have very little time and you need a quick glimpse of what you've got in front of you. I make sure that my seating plans are supportive. Now, I remember when I started teaching, I used to separate children who were friends because I thought if they talked, that would create a problem. I do prefer now children to cooperate and to work together and to support each other. So wherever possible, I will sit students together that look after each other and teach each other and support each other in their learning. And I often ask my students, who do you want to sit next to? And I find that this has been far more productive than my previous separating children who are friends. Also, I make sure that I access SEND information, so special needs information, regularly, and that I make sure that this information makes its way onto my lesson plans. That all of this, like the documents, the context sheets, are in front of me when I'm planning. So I'm always really, really aware of the people that I have in front of me, and that saves me a lot of problems. And in fact, I haven't put this here, but knowing names very, very early on is a massive help when it comes to behaviour management. The second recommendation from the EEF is to teach learning behaviours as well as manage behaviour when it happens. And I'm a firm believer in doing that. So I have a number of routines in the classroom, and I teach them and I practice them time and time and time again. I'm very happy to teach students how to go quiet, for example. And I teach them very gently and we do a little practice. Or I'm very, very happy to teach students the routine at the start of the lesson. So students come in, they grab the book from the back, they open the book in the back of the book, and they have a task at the front, a very quick task, a retrieval task. So they know and they're very well practiced. They come in, grab their book, sit down, turn to the back of the book, complete the task and wait for it to be marked. It's in the teaching and in the practicing of these routines that you will find your success. Repetition is crucial. It's really important that we model good behaviour for students, especially when we're working with students who maybe don't have good role models around them all the time. And so the way that we speak to them and the way that we thank them for their cooperation and the way that we thank them for their contribution serves as a model. And I would go as far as to say, I've just modeled for you how you would reply to this question, or I've just modeled for you how you would help somebody else, or how you would praise somebody else after giving you a good answer, or I've just modeled for you how to correct someone politely, and actually teach them these positive behaviours. And then in terms of teaching, as well as teaching routines, I think a teacher has to have expectations that are very clear for students, so that students don't have to try and find out what your expectations are or test where the line is. I believe a teacher should have very few expectations, very, very few, and very, very clear. And I mean few, because they have to be, the expectations that you have need to be very easy to remember. So I've always gone for 3 expectations, and I'll show you in a second what they are. And I would start at the beginning of the lesson and I would say to the students, these are my 3 expectations. And then maybe tomorrow I would say, can you remind me of what my expectations are? And then if there was an issue where I thought bad behavior was developing, I would go to a student and I say, right, let's think about our first expectation. How does that fit in? So if I just show you my expectations have always been, like I said, very brief and very few. I expect respect from everybody. I expect effort, 100% effort, and I expect students to be prepared. Now, in 18 years in the classroom, I have come to realize that every type of behavior that I don't want has to do with one of these. It has to do with a lack of respect, with a lack of effort, or with students not being prepared, or not having their homework, or not having their pens or whatever. So having these 3 words on our lips all the time and continuing to draw attention to these 3 words makes sure that students have a very clear idea of what's expected of them and where the line is. And it actually helps them relax into not feeling like they have to constantly test the boundaries. The EEF recommends that you use classroom management strategies to support good classroom behaviour, and we know this. So I've thought about a few that I've used over the years that I find quite useful. Greeting students at the door, famously useful because it sets a difference between their space and mine and my space. So I would greet students very warmly, regardless of what happened last lesson, very warmly every lesson with a smile and a hello. And I would filter students out who are not ready for the lesson just yet. And I would do this very skillfully by, if a student's not quite ready, I would just look at whoever's behind them and greet them instead and bring them in instead. And so a student wouldn't feel necessarily like they've been told off. They would just feel like they need to do something extra, something else. They need to make a change in order to be welcomed into the lesson. Positive instructions is crucial as well. So you would tell students what to do. I'm sure I've heard myself when I was younger saying, why are you swinging on your chair? Or saying things like, don't swing on your chair. A positive instruction is to tell students what you want them to do. So put your chair down. A positive instruction doesn't invite conversation, and it gets the reaction much more quickly. So instead of don't run, you would say walk. Faced consequences are a great tool for a teacher. And I like most of my faced consequences, and obviously faced consequences sort of get more serious as they go. I like my first few to be almost invisible. So my first few would be looking at the teacher, giving them the teacher stare, or just saying their names, or just pointing at them while everybody else is working. And then you'd go on to upping the consequences, as in saying, for example, the rule is that you need to be quiet, or I've just asked you to be quiet, and then face something a bit stronger, like if you're not quiet, I'm going to have to ask you to move, and then moving the student. And then if this doesn't work, then you would ask the student to wait outside for a moment, and so follow on, but always start your consequences with as low as you possibly can, with just maybe just a look, as quietly and as non-intrusively as you can. I have a policy that learning comes first, so I try very, very hard to not deal with behaviour in the lesson in an intrusive way. So I will get most of my behaviour management done quietly while everybody's busy. So I'm very good at making sure that if trouble's brewing, that I find something for students to do so that I can get closer to where the trouble's brewing and sort it out quietly. I would never discuss behaviour in the lesson, but I would always invite students to come back at the end of the day if they have a grievance. So if anybody wants to talk about why I've told them off or why I've spoken to them, I would say, I'm very happy to talk about this, but not now, because learning comes first. I heard this phrase before, the standard you walk past. It means that you can never accept behaviour that you're not happy with. You must always tackle it, even if you're in a hurry, even if you're tired. Because if you accept behaviour that's not quite right, that's the behaviour that you will get. So this is something I remind myself sometimes towards the end of term, when I want to just say, oh, just leave it, but no, you mustn't, you can't. And then recently I've been thinking quite a lot about what causes friction in the lesson, and by friction I mean what makes students irritated and loud, and what makes them want to grab your attention. And so I've been trying to analyse what causes this friction and just eliminate it. And I'll give you an example. With some of my classes, not all of them, taking the register in Spanish causes friction, and it causes trouble, and it causes arguments. A part of the lesson that is gold, that should be a part of the lesson that you have to really take advantage of. So I've removed that. I take the register in English just for now, and then I will try and introduce it again. But I've removed that bit of friction and I've sort of soothed that part of the lesson. So always sort of look out for what's causing issues in your lesson and see if you can change it or take it away. Our fourth recommendation is to use simple approaches as part of your regular routine. And I'm just going to go through these very quickly. So ditch dead time, always have something to give students when they're finished. It could just be revised from this knowledge organizer. Tight transitions means I always warn students when a transition's coming up. And I say, right, we're going to now move from one activity to the other. And I wouldn't want you to start a conversation in the middle. Make sure that the transitions go very, very quickly, and actually teaching students how to manage them helps with that. Praise loud. This is advice from Doug Lemov from his book, Teach Like a Champion. So praise loud and fix quietly. And precise praise. If you are praising students, let go of well done and just tell them what they've done well, specifically. Calm stir, I have a portfolio of activities that are calming and a portfolio of activities that are stimulating. And I can always switch if I need to. I know when a class needs calm and I know when they need to be stirred, and a teacher has to be flexible and be able to just change the activity from a calm to a stir to help the class soothe into the lesson. Take up time and partial agreement are ways to avoid confrontation. So if a student has just been spoken to, it's important to let them have 30 seconds to take that feeling in and leave them alone for those 30 seconds, and then come back and check that they are following the instruction after having given them just a little bit of space and a little bit of time. And partial agreement, both ideas from Bill Rogers, it's another way of not confronting a student. So if a student says, for example, well, Mrs. Rogers lets me do this in her lesson, you would partially agree. You would say that may be, but in my lesson, this is what we do. So you wouldn't engage in a discussion. Given two choices is famous behavior technique. So if you think someone's going to refuse an instruction, you might just give them two choices. Say, for example, all right, Johnny, you can sit here or you can sit here. And they're much more likely to sit down than if you say, right, sit down. Depends on your customer, I suppose. But given two choices, so would you like to do the reading number 1 or reading number 2? And then naturally, the human brain is directed to one of those. Rule reminder is a very effective way of not confronting someone. So if a student is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, say, for example, using their phone in the lesson when they're not allowed, I would just politely ask the student to remind me about the rule about phones. So I say, sorry, can you remind me about the rule about phones? And the student naturally will answer the question, oh, I'm not supposed to use phones. And so they're telling themselves off rather than you telling them off. State the obvious is a similar thing. So if you don't want to confront a student, you may just state what they're doing. So you may just say, right, Johnny, you are poking Jimmy with a ruler. And often just stating what they're doing will end the behavior without it telling off, without a threat or a consequence. And then my favorite is silent reprimand, which I sort of mentioned earlier. If you can tell a student off by signing or by looking into their eyes sternly for a few seconds, you must try not to use verbal language because it interrupts the lesson and it sort of chops the learning in bits. So I would always make sure that I create something for everybody else to do, and I will deal silently with as much behavior as I can. But as we know with behavior, and this is our 6th recommendation, consistency is key. So you have to chase everything up. You have to chase every incident up. And that doesn't mean that you have to chase them all in the same way. You can be flexible in the way that you chase incidents up, but every homework must be chased and every detention, if there is one, must be chased because students can see where there are weaknesses in the system and they do like to test those. And then finally, if there is a policy in your school, you make it stronger by using it. So where there is a policy, we need to always stand together and make sure that we are using it as one, because that's how we make the policy stronger. So I hope there were some practical things there that you can take away, and there's so many people from all over the place. So I hope that some of this was something that you can use in your own classrooms. If you have any questions or if you'd like to get in touch, you've got my Twitter handle there, and yeah, I'd love to help if I can at all. I'll stop sharing now.
Alina, thank you so much for sharing. That was incredible, really focused advice for colleagues, such helpful, tips and links as well, particularly the link to the Education Endowment Fund. That's an amazing website. I shared the link in the chat when you were talking, and heartily recommend colleagues have a look at that. But the practical examples you've just given, I'm formerly a teacher, and some of those were new to me, so I think they were brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
There was a few questions in the chat. Bernard made a point. Is behaviour varying from area to area, class to class, and from school to school? I think you touched on that at the start of your talk. In my school, for example, I would say it's not all good. I think it's because they thought the school wouldn't be back because of lockdown.
I think students who've missed transition are struggling the most. So our year sevens, not just for me, I have lots of teacher friends, year sevens are struggling the most because they've missed so much time. And next year's year seven will have missed double the transition. So they're going to really find it difficult. They need a lot of love and a lot of structure.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I used to teach in a Catholic school where they followed Don Bosco, and he used to say, it's not enough that you love your students, but they must know that they are loved. I think there's a lot of truth in that. There's another question, sorry, Fethi said, apart from your own creative practices, are there exterior factors that would help you deal with behaviour? I mean, would a global partnership, for example, help your students address their behaviour as well as saving you efforts?
I think my students would definitely benefit from a global partnership because they only understand the world from their point of view. Now, I was very lucky to teach in China for a summer, and I try and bring the love of learning that Chinese students had to my classroom and show it to them. If they could see that firsthand, that would be as life-changing as it was for me when I saw it. For them to see that there's more than one way to see the world, and there's more than one way to appreciate education and learning. So yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Fethi makes another point. He says it's like strict, flexible discipline, great way to address behaviour. Fethi, were you saying there that sometimes strict and sometimes not strict? Yeah. So do you agree with that, Alina?
I think more than ever, we have to have very clear lines. We do have to have very clear lines, but we need to know very well when it's okay to bend the rules, and to do it quietly, not to advertise it, but to do it quietly and to nurture the children sometimes. And that sometimes means that, I mean, I love rules. I'm a teacher, I love rules, but sometimes I have to be flexible in how I apply them. And I really do think now more than ever.
Now, are there any questions from colleagues here now for Alina? Has anyone got a question or a point that they'd like to make? If so, please raise your hand or speak out.
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, Roxanne, so go for it.
Go ahead. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please, Roxanne. You're in Jamaica,
yes.
yeah?
Yes. So I have experienced very difficult time during the lockdown teaching online to control my students in their own space, because we're working with students at their different homes and all these different distractions and so on. It has been significantly hard for me to control behavior online. I would like to know some advice I could get in terms of how to control students in their own space while teaching online, because it is very practical to have them in front of you and to display all these behavior management skills that have been introduced to. But what are some possible ways that we can control them online? We have the option where they just unmute their mics and they outburst and do something that is interruptive. We have times when we're talking to them and they're tuning us out and they're playing video games or watching TV, and there's so many things to deal with. And sometimes it is very frustrating. So I would like to know some possible ways that we can manage these behaviors online. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you for the question. So I've got a few ideas that are coming, but I'll start by saying there was never, I taught online for a long time and there was never a perfect fix. So at some point I had to accept that there were some things that I couldn't control and I had to let go of some of that control, but I did manage to do a few things that worked. I would start the lesson with my 3 expectations. And there were a couple of extra online expectations that had to do with how you use the software. And I would train the students at the beginning of every lesson on these expectations and on the online expectations. And then I would sort of print screen the expectations. And anytime anybody broke any of my rules, I would copy and paste that print screen on the chat and it would appear straight after what they'd done. So they had maybe, I mean, on a bad day, 30 repetitions of the expectation. Very quickly for me, it was just control paste. But they had the message thrown at them constantly. So the repetition of the expectations. Also, they needed teaching because they hadn't learned what it's like to be on an online lesson. They were learning as we were learning. So constant repetition and explanations of what they had to do, and little videos sometimes of how to get some of the things that I was asking them to do, how to do them in practice. Just like a Loom video for 30 seconds. This is how you access your homework. This is how you go into OneNote. That really helped with some of the confusion. And then other things that I did was, for example, I knew there were some websites that are really good for learning. For example, for languages, Quizlet is brilliant for learning, or Bluecat is brilliant for learning. And I would use those as rewards. So alternate hard learning with 5 minutes of that, which would give me a break. It would give them a break and still have them really, really engaged. But I think the most effective thing was the sort of copying and pasting of the expectations every time someone sort of misbehaved. And obviously I learned to mute. And that, that was, if you didn't follow your expectations, eventually you'd be mute. And that was a consequence to an action as well.
Alina, thank you. I'm conscious of time because we need to move on to the next speaker. And I know also that you've got a young one to look after, but could you do me a favour and paste those wonderful suggestions for those websites? Quizlet, wasn't it one of them?
And Bluecat, yeah.
And
You would love them.
Yeah.
They're so much fun.
That was a fantastic presentation and such useful advice.
Thank you.
Coming to you in the future for more advice on behaviour management. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, we move to our next speaker, who's Farah. Farah, would you like to share your screen, please?
Yes, thank you, James.
Thank you.
Just one moment.
Roxanne, thank you for your question.
You're welcome.
Okay, here we go. Perfect. My name is Farah Samir. I have been working in the education sector for 10 years. I started off as a TA and then I moved on to teaching. And then I worked as a head of pastoral for a British international school in Cairo, Egypt. It's called the BSE, or the British School of Egypt. Here are some pictures. It is a co-educational entity, comprises of both the primary and the secondary sections. So we accept children from the age of 4 up until grade 12, up until graduation. Okay, so our first discussion point today is about behavior as a result of the lockdown. Before starting, I just want to tell everyone that as a school, we opened and closed multiple times. I know that some schools did shut down and they are operating normally. However, for us, it was quite different. So the first point I would like to discuss is that behavior has been affected across many key stages. We as a department, we have received many requests to follow up with misbehavior and conflict resolution between children and children, or even between children and teachers. So as I was saying, we started school on campus and we remained on campus for about a term. Then when the cases started rising, we moved to distance learning. After that, the cases started going down, so we went back to school. So this alone was an effect on behavior, because children or students were not really used to working with a stable routine. Point number 3, there is a greater need for social emotional learning, or PSHE, personal, social, and health and economic education, more than ever. Students have missed out a lot on social interaction and social learning due to the lockdown. While we do have SEL, which is applied at school, the students focus more on core subjects like math, science, and English, or their own language, in our case, Arabic. But SEL, we really need to try our best as a school to encourage children to look at SEL as if it's a core subject, in my opinion. We have also seen a drop in achievement levels. However, for the students who do have a family who are working from home, or a tutor or a guardian who's supporting them, these are the ones that did show improvement. So it really depends on home. If there is more follow-up, you could see more effort. If the parents or the family, they work outside of the home, it will be more challenging. Okay, the next discussion point is, what behaviors have you observed? We have noticed hyperactivity, laziness, and irritability. We noticed that some students were showing hyperactivity and laziness, like fluctuating between both. When students are hyper aroused, their behavior becomes over responsive to the environment. This is when you could see something like anxiety or anger or emotional outbursts. On the other hand, if students are hypo aroused, they become under responsive to the environment. They become inattentive, bored, hard to reach, and so on. So we did notice both behaviors, hyperarousal and hypoarousal, and even you can even see the same students' behaviors fluctuating between both. A lot of people, including staff, are also facing pandemic fatigue. So this really did have an impact on behavior as well. Point number 2, anxiety. We have been dealing with both anxious students and parents. I was personally anxious at the beginning of the pandemic. One of my students, I've noticed quite a shift with one specific student. He wasn't really afraid of the virus. He was very argumentative about wearing his mask until the class right next door was shut down for 2 weeks. After this, he stopped coming to school for weeks. So this is just one example for anxiety. Point number 3, excessive talk in lessons. I would say that both points 3 and 4 are related to one another. For excessive talk in lessons, it is quite normal for children and older children to steal a quick chat in class, but this was continuous. I think this was due to the students being separated in bubble systems. We had a very strict bubble system. We would never have more than 3 classes outside in the playground at once. And even those 3 classes were separated into zones, A, B, and C. So it was less opportunities for the children to meet one another. So they had a lot of talking energy that they want to release that they weren't able to do so with their friends. Number 4, which is very related to number 3, is excessive movements around the school. They would always show up late to class because they want to go and say hello to another friend in another zone or in another bubble. And they were not just sticking to the bubble system. This was very, very new for them, very challenging for them. And of course, because of their age, they can't understand the effects of a pandemic. They don't even understand what a pandemic means for us. So we're just trying to help them understand what a pandemic means. In addition, many sports and leisure centers were closed. So a lot of these children weren't able to work out or practice sports because not everybody has access to a place where they can practice sports. Point number 5, some students were refusing to wear their mask or actually wear it above the nose. And I also think it depends on home as well, because, you know, all over around the world, you have the anti-maskers, the people who want to be free of the mask. So this also happened. Number 6, challenging on argumentative behavior. Well, you have a mix and match of both. The normal challenging behavior for teens or argumentative behavior for teens. However, most of this behavior was challenging COVID safety measures. So the children were trying their best to argue and challenge wearing masks, sticking to the bubbles, or social distancing while walking in a line, and so on. Next, we have personally seen, as a department, an increase in cyberbullying cases because everybody shifted to online learning. So the students are spending much more time on the internet. I mean, cyberbullying has been occurring for years, but I personally think that it has really resurfaced these days because we are using the internet more. To battle this at school, we've created a step-by-step process, which includes investigations involving families. There are plenty of paid and free programs online as well to support educators with tackling bullying and cyberbullying. We also noticed plagiarism in online assessments. We were able to detect plagiarism off of Google. Some of the plagiarized statements were a bit funny because the students copied and pasted without reading the rest of the sentence. So you could find one answer saying, for more information, visit blah, blah, blah.com. So it was quite funny. We were able to detect this kind of plagiarism, and also we were also able to detect same incorrect answers shared amongst 2 or like a group of 3 students. The final point, which many of you may find different, is that we actually had less behavior issues in online lessons. Why? Because we noticed a specific pattern that the students who do have behavioral difficulties were the ones actually not showing up to class. So this is why less disruptions occurred. However, the school did follow up with attendance. And again, it all comes down to home. If the parents are working from home, they are more likely to be able to follow up. If they work from outside the home and were working online, they won't be able to follow up. Our next discussion point is what would be a holistic approach. The first point is not always applicable because not every school can hire additional staffing or qualified individuals. The second point is to utilize the skills of the school counselors to work as positive behavior mentors in addition to providing training to staff. This year, we utilized their support in the effective day-to-day organization and running of the school in regards to behavior. They worked as detectives, investigating issues, working very closely with pupils. They also help with restorative justice practice in our isolated reflection time, which is one of our consequence areas. It's not suspension, but it's like a place where students sit with the counselor to reflect on their actions and learn more about their actions. Next, according to research, positive student-teacher relationships and positive learning environments in general have been found on their own to mitigate behavior issues, which is the same thing that Elena said, I think. Number 4, SEL, social emotional learning. We need to tie in SEL with events, with whole school events, something like student-led events. This year it was very challenging for us to conduct events due to the lockdown. However, we were able to conduct online workshops on Google Meet, something like coping with the lockdown. We celebrated Mental Health Week, but again, attendance was not always consistent because again, the students are tired. Lots of people have been facing pandemic fatigue as well. Finally, a whole school approach to recording and responding to behavior like policies and documentation is very, very important, and I'll discuss that in the following slide. Okay. What strategies do we think are effective? Fair and consistent application of the behavior policy across the whole school. The character of a school includes the pattern of exchanges between the system, the environment, and the design of the internal structure, policies, processes and procedures, and so on. For policies to work, all teachers need to work hand in hand and consistently. If one teacher applies the policy and the other doesn't, it won't be fair to anyone. Another drawback we could face if we don't apply the policy is that students could stereotype the teachers. For example, the student could think about, so that teacher, he's rigid. He just gave me a red card, for example. Then the student could also relate the teacher who doesn't apply the policy to the one being on their side. So it's not good for us as educators. We're not all the same page because again, children need consistency. Number two, information or data. Discipline data is a great way to analyze behavior because very simply, if incidents aren't being recorded properly, then we have no way to measure the behavior's impact on the students, and we have no method to apply our policy. I just placed a picture here to show everyone an example of how we can effectively record behavior. So our school policy consists of different levels or colors, as you may say. Like, for example, if a child talks in class, you can give him a stage 1 or a yellow card. Excuse me. If a child pushes another child, for example, you go further up a stage, or stage 2, a red card. So we log every single student in every single class in our behavior trackers, which are divided by days. So let's say we have a student here who got a red card. What is the reason for receiving the red card? He pushed another child. And on a Monday, for instance, he was talking in class, so he received a yellow card. This is very important for us, not only to apply the policy, but to be able to create individualized behavior plans for our students. Number 4. Number 3. We have been receiving official behavior referrals for following up with behavior, again, to create individual behavior plans, or maybe to check whether a student needs counseling or outside therapy and so on. Next, something that is very important, which is school and home partnerships with students. There's nothing stronger for the benefit of the child than the school and home being aligned. It is basically through successful home and school partnerships that we can achieve the best results for our children. Next is, of course, teacher training. This year it was also a struggle to conduct any live or face-to-face teacher training, but we could always offer training, like this session that we're having right now. Keeping students engaged is a very good intervention to improve behavior. Giving students jobs, allowing the environment to be student-led. maybe giving the student an important job like a head of house or a prefect or like a student leader and so on. Finally, for online lessons, we could actually write a policy for online lessons with steps. Like, for example, first offense is a verbal warning. Second offense, the child will be sent out of online class for a few minutes, and so on. However, again, the online policy for us, we didn't really need to use it that much because the pupils who did actually misbehave were the ones who never showed up to class. Okay. Thank you very much.
Farah, that was absolutely incredible. Thank you. And again, you've brought to it a whole different perspective. I think from your psychological training, much more observational. Love the way that you were talking about other behaviours such as plagiarism, such as, you know, not coming to school. Those kind of behaviours as well are so pivotal. There are lots of questions, and I don't know if I'll capture them all, but Nada said, especially primary school students missing their normal social life, which is true, I guess, yeah, that lack of their normal social life. Williams asked the question, Farah, teachers, colleagues and subordinates too have shown behaviour changes due to the lockdown. That's interesting. Please share a few that you've noticed and how one may go about them. So that's the behaviour of colleagues as well and subordinates.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of teachers faced anxiety as well related to COVID. By Christmas, we had a lot of positive teachers, a lot. So I'd say the shared behavior was anxiety and fear. We had 17 positive teachers by Christmas. It was because, you know, it comes in waves, really. The wave, the Christmas wave was a very strong one. So I'd say the common behavior would be definitely anxiety. One of my coworkers was upset. She stayed isolated at home for 2 weeks. The symptoms weren't that bad, but she was depressed.
Depression. Another question from Emmanuel. I like the idea of yellow, amber and red cards to track their behaviour. It should work in primary as well.
Yes, we use the same behavior policy with both primary and secondary. But sometimes the secondary students think that the colors are a bit babyish, so you can always say stage 1, stage 2, stage 3.
Yeah. I was just going to make a point. You made a very interesting point about that there was an improvement in behaviour because some of the students who had behaviour issues were not present. I was at a conference yesterday where they said that some students with special educational needs who normally struggle in the classroom because of noise, for example, were much more relaxed at home. So their behaviour improved because they were in their own space and they felt more comfortable. Interesting. You know, other reason for better behaviour in the online hybrid environment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, really super. And also, you mentioned the character, the design of the building. You know, what's the ventilation like? What are the light levels like? We had Professor Stephen Heppel on recently saying if it's too dark, students will actually go to sleep. Their concentration will wane. And if the CO2 levels are too high, that will lead to a depreciation in their ability to cognitively to think. So you mentioned many useful points. We have to move on again. Thank you very much indeed
Thank you
for speaking today. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. We move on to our third speaker now, who is Daniel Bull from the UK. Daniel, are you okay to share your screen? There will be a chance for more questions and input at the end. So please do stay tuned to the end because there'll be opportunity for you to say something if you haven't had the chance.
Can you see the first slide?
No, you've got to share your screen.
A bit slow on.
No problem. Thank you. That's great, Daniel. Super.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and certainly welcome to everyone who has joined us today. It'd be remiss of me, first of all, not to mention thanks to my mum and stepdad who've joined in purely just to see my debut as a guest speaker for the Global School Alliance. So, of course, I've got to mention them. But at the same time, I'm also so amazed and really, really humbled by the number of different people who've joined us from countries all over the world. And I can't even say good afternoon. I've got to say good morning to perhaps some of the people who are in Peru or perhaps the western part of Canada. Good afternoon to some of those that are in the UK and India and in Africa. And also good evening, some of our colleagues who joined us from India and Bangladesh. It's going to be about 10 o'clock in the evening now over there. So it truly is amazing at how many people have joined us. And I'm very, very humbled by that. So a little bit more about myself. I'm a qualified teacher. I've been teaching for 10 years now. And in my second year, I became curriculum leader of business and politics and taught that at GSA and A level. So that's up to 18 years old for those who don't understand the UK system completely. I then became HOH, which is head of house. So effectively, it's a pastoral leader. And the best way to make reference to that, I presume, would be through Harry Potter. Those who know Harry Potter, they were in the house systems in different houses. And so I was a head of house for a school in Telford, which is in the West Midlands. 4 years ago, I then became an assistant head teacher with a focus on pastoral and also academic achievement for a quarter of the school in type of like a head of school model. And I've also said I'm an assistant principal, and I've got an asterisk by that. Reason being, where I'm broadcasting from today, I'm currently on a secondment at a school in Stoke-on-Trent in England, assisting the team here just for the summer term, just to try and provide some additional insight and additional capacity. What do I believe in? It was one thing that my first principal said to me. He said, you have to know what you believe in, and you've got to stick to your values, which I'll come on to shortly as we move through and we discuss the behaviour. I'm such a big believer in school culture and identity. If we want our students to succeed and we want them to behave and we want them to be part of the school, you have to give them that culture and identity. And I believe that's achieved through a number of ways, through the house system, the whole family feel, the community feel, through vertical tutoring. And by that, I mean, when we have our form groups, our tutor groups, you have got students who might be aged 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 in the same group together. You then find that the older students will then take some of the younger students under their wing. They'll support one another. They'll be friends. And it does help to erase any sort of playground bullying that we've actually probably forgotten about the last 2 years because everyone's been bubbled. So actually, when the year sevens come into school, we talk about transition, they already know the eldest students in the school, and they've got that immediate affinity to them. Fundamentally, I feel schools have to have strong levels of sport. The school has to stand for something and give students opportunity to go and perform physically in something. I also fundamentally believe performing arts are vital. Dance, drama, singing, playing musical instruments, absolutely crucial. And D of E is, so I should say D of E as opposed to DFE. D of E is the Duke of Edinburgh Award, formerly ran by His Royal Highness Prince Philip. Now it's ran by His Royal Highness Prince Edward. But it's a scheme in the UK where students get to volunteer, they get to go and do things at weekends and contribute back to their community and learn skills through it. And cadets, Army, Navy, Air Force cadets is a really, really powerful thing to create this school culture and identity. One of the things I'm very, very proud of, I was part of a team 4 years ago that transformed a coasting requires improvement school into a good school. And for those who perhaps don't understand the context of that, a coasting school is one that's just done the same thing that it's always done forever. It's not changed, it's not transformed, and it's always just been okay. When people say, how are things? Oh, well, it's just okay, rather than really, really raising the bar. And what we saw as a result, aspirations and progress, it rose year on year to be above average. And again, this year and last year, although it's not comparable data because of the COVID pandemic, we are really raising those aspirations, and we're giving our students such great opportunities by letting them walk away with excellent academic qualifications. I was asked to talk a little bit about my school experience as well, and I tried to pull together some photos that I think really sort of embrace what I'm about and what the schools and the cultures I'm about. And you know, there's a whole range of things: celebrating with students, celebrating with colleagues. There's a picture where I'm in red and we've got some of my colleagues, we're all dressed like hula girls. And it's about also showing to the students that you're willing to have a bit of a laugh. Team bonding events, healthy competition. You'll see some of my students are holding one of the house cups that I won in 2017. And it creates that healthy culture. It's really important. On the right of the screen, walking down the path, and then the group of students huddled together, student leadership, which is really, really vital to school success. As mentioned at the very, very start, I'm also the host of More Than a Job podcast, and this was something that was only started at the very end of January. Me and my two colleagues, James and Mike, we said, we do so much in school, and we love school, and we love, you know, giving students opportunities. Let's talk about it. Now, I'm the co-creator and the producer of More Than a Job podcast, and very simply, with 3 educators and with 3 friends who discuss education, current affairs, and all of the things that make teaching more than a job. And the thing behind the name is that those who are in education, whether you're a teacher, a member of support staff, whatever it might be, teaching isn't just a job. It's not 9 till 5. You don't just drop it at the end of the day and think, oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. It's something that stays with you when you go home at night time, during the holidays. Teaching is much more than just teaching a lesson. We've got all those other fundamentals with it. And we've been really, really privileged to have a number of really high profile guests. So along the top right, if my cursor can point to them, in the United Kingdom, obviously we have the Houses of Parliament, which we've got the House of Commons in, and our MPs are held to account by committees. And the gentleman here is called, it's the Right Honourable Robert Halford MP, and he's the chair of the Education Select Committee. So he's the one who holds our government ministers to account over education. And then we've got a number of other MPs, Edward Timpson, CBE MP, Jonathan Gullis MP, Ian Mearns, Fleur Anderson, Jess Phillips MP, who've come onto our show. And Didi Okezi, she is the CEO of UK Youth, and we spent time discussing with her about youth work in the UK. And Branwyn Jeffries, who is the BBC's Chief Education Editor. If you tune into BBC News, you'll often see her. We've also got Tom Bennett here. Hopefully a lot of people will know who Tom Bennett is, but he's the government's behaviour star. He's the government's top advisor on behaviour, and we built a really, really good relationship with Tom. Tom's also the founder of ResearchEd, which people may have heard of. Then, not to do them disservice, but we've got David Weston of the Teacher Development Trust, Andy Buck, leadership expert, Hannah Wilson, who's the founder of Women Ed and ResearchEd, PC Ben Pearson, who's a retired police officer, but does a lot of work on PTSD and mental health, Abby Bayford, who's director of Institute and does an awful lot of work developing people, Stephen Lane, who's an author of Beyond Wiping Noses, which is a behaviour book, and this gentleman here is called Sam Strickland, who's written 2 books, Education Exposed 1 and 2. We were supposed to be speaking to Sam on Monday, but he had a call from an external visitor, so he was otherwise engaged. But that gives you a little bit of a flavour about the podcast. Now, I was asked to discuss behaviour in schools, and I think it's very simple to describe behaviour has been a roller coaster. We have had days of perfect behaviour. We've also had days that are extremely challenging. And I think if anyone tries to tell you anything different, I don't think they're being completely honest. And I asked one of my colleagues about this, and he gave me this quote. He said, behaviour has inevitably dipped as students use this as a way to draw attention to themselves. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. Students, it's very rare that students deliberately misbehave because they want to be naughty. Students don't want that. Humans don't want that. I'm going to talk about conformity a little bit later on. But generally, people, humans, our natural instinct is to conform. So often students are misbehaving because they want some attention, good, bad, negative, positive, whatever it might be. But they're trying to get your attention. They want a conversation with you. And sometimes students don't know how to behave. So sometimes when they do misbehave, don't be frustrated by it. Actually, sometimes think it's them. It's the only way they can communicate to get your attention. I also feel behaviour in schools has dipped because we're focusing on all the bitty things, the small things. We're continually telling students, can you please put your mask on? Can you please put your mask up? Can you please maintain your social distancing, etc.? And the way I would describe it is we've become speed cameras. We've become traffic wardens. There's no negotiation. Nobody likes a traffic warden and nobody likes a speed camera. However, they are there for everyone's safety. The principle of what we're asking the students to do is completely and utterly sound. But we are now shifting our conversations to the negative as opposed to the positive. And I think that then naturally has a behavioural impact because schools do become negative. We've also lost our routines. Come back again, humans, children, we all crave conformity and we all crave routine and structure. Now, lockdown, remote learning, students not being able to use their books because they have to have a 48-hour quarantine or a 72-hour quarantine before they can be marked. Individual groups of students going into self-isolation. Also, parents working from home. I remember as a child when I was growing up that one of the most consistent things in my life, every morning when I woke up, my mum or dad were downstairs getting ready for the day, getting ready to go to work. But over the past 2 years or 15 months, sorry, parents haven't been going to work. Parents haven't been getting up in the morning. Parents haven't been getting prepared for the day. And let's not underestimate the impact that that breakdown in routine is having on young children, young students up and down the country and all over the world. I also now think it's become easier to defy people. I think it's now easier to say no to somebody. We talked about the little things, the masks, the walking in corridors. A student not wearing a mask is a very easy way to defy you. And they're doing it more and more. The media portrayal, seeing people deliberately ignoring lockdown instructions from governments, seeing people fighting and challenging the police in countries all across the world. The portrayal is pretty negative. And I think Elena touched on it earlier, or possibly Farah, we're talking about the non-mask wearers as well. So when children are seeing adults behave in these ways, it becomes easier for them because they're thinking, okay, if adults are doing that, surely we as children can do it as well. And I've stolen this phrase from Tom Bennett, but students have become warning saturated. They've had enough. We are continually giving them warnings. We are continually telling them off. And I think the effect now is wearing off because they've been told so many times over and over again. And I also feel that there's an issue with behaviour because of this concept of everybody needing the right to express themselves. Everybody wants the right to be heard. I completely believe in freedom of speech. I completely believe in freedom of expression, thought, conscience, religion, gathering, etc. However, everybody now wants the right to be heard. They want the right to express themselves, but what they don't want is to take on the responsibilities that come with whatever it is they want. And people are now, society has turned into a situation where people want all their rights. They don't want the responsibilities that go with it. They don't want to be held accountable or responsible for the things they're doing. So that's my theory of where behaviour is and why it's been that way. But with a few more things as well, I think certainly I found this in England, the media, politicians, their narrative of catch up, all that anyone is saying is catch up, catch up, catch up. Saying catch up is suggesting that you've lost something, and immediately it is setting the tone for our students, for our young people in our country and all across the world. Students are being told X, Y, and Z, and subliminally this is going to have an effect. Students are going to start believing that maybe I am behind, maybe I'm not very clever, maybe I have missed these things. And I think there's some irresponsibility in terms of the narrative. And I'm just going to read you something that I said to my year 11s as they left a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to read it word for word. I remember as a year 11 student myself, the dream of not having to do GCSE exams, a dream that would never be anywhere near reality, but a dream that, as we experienced last year, was actually a damp squib for all involved and incredibly intense. Losing the chance to prove yourself at the toughest altar of challenge wasn't the dream that the year 11 students had fancifully imagined. Instead, it became an anticlimax to a mightily hard-working school career, and that is important to remember. Students will have had mixed feelings as they left, but just remember all these year 11 students across the world, you have worked mightily hard, and my gosh, you should be proud of that. Look at a day when you are supremely satisfied at the end. It's not a day when you lounge around doing nothing. It's a day you've had everything to do and you've done it. So I'm worried now that this is turning into unintended confirmation bias. We're telling students they're behind. We're telling students they've lost learning. We're telling students they're going to struggle. Are we now actually making them believe it because of our narrative? And the year 11 effect, a small number have been noticeably poor because they have seen little benefit in returning. And in England, when we've got the teacher assessed grades, it has worked for the vast majority, but it's probably adversely affected the most vulnerable. And this is a quote from one of my students in year 11. She said, "I'd rather take proper exams because of the pressure." And that pressure will then be felt by all the other students. We've talked about the influence of year 11. And if our year 11s are tense and stressed, that is going to be felt across the school. The ripple effect will be down. And in England, our rigid assessments, almost were worse than exams, as already touched on. So what do we do about it? I've sat and had a little bit of a rant there for 8 minutes or so about all the problems. But what do we do about it? I would always say this to people, always advocate this. Know your values and hold the line. Hold on tight to what you believe in and don't allow that to be compromised. That's not saying you can't ever be wrong. Of course you can be wrong. But if you've got a set of principles, you must stick by them. This is a quote from Sam Strickland. He says, "The single most powerful way to bring efficiency, focus and rigor to a classroom or school," which is my annotation, "is by installing strong procedures and routines. We must always hold the line. And to do that, we have to have clear expectations. Don't overcomplicate. We shouldn't have lists and lists of rules." I'm going to make another Harry Potter reference. The fifth one, the Order of the Phoenix, when Dolores Umbridge came in and she was pinning all of those different rules to the walls. A school I worked at in Telford, England, that the principal brought in a very, very simple set of expectations. New Hope, which was nice to others, uniform, homework, on task, punctual and equipment. And I've not worked at that school for 4 years now, and it's still extremely clear in my head. If the students get those 6 things right, they're on the right tracks. Don't overcomplicate things. We also spend too much time assuming that everyone knows the rules. Explain it to them. We should be continually explaining, front load and continually revisit all of our expectations. Assume that people don't know. Assume that people have forgotten. Because there's no harm in over teaching. We look at retrieval practice, we look at sequencing, we do it in every single lesson that we teach. 70–80% of our lessons should be retrieval, should be that sequencing blend. Do the same thing with behaviour. Behaviour is a curriculum that should be taught. What else can we do? Culture. Culture is so important. This is a quote from Tom Bennett, and he says, "There is no point at which you can say my job here is done. Behaviour management is like juggling 3 balls. Stop juggling and you drop the balls." It comes back to what I said before about that school culture, that sense of identity, the house system. We'll use the Harry Potter analogy yet again. All of those students are proud to be part of their school. They're proud to be part of their house. We must be celebrating the positive. And sometimes this is easier said than done. It does require effort, determination and follow through, but where you can, always draw the positives from your students. House events and the opportunities to positively compete. Kids love competing. Kids love competition. Kids love chances to prove themselves. And these competitions, even though we're in lockdown, can be simple. They can be quizzes. They can be individual things. They can be in year bubbles. As a school, as a leader, make it cool to get things right. Talk about it, praise those students who do get those things right. Extracurricular, beyond the classroom, clubs, opportunities, experiences are vital. And this is really important. Don't just teach the students to behave, teach them and explain to them about valuing that behaviour. This is why we behave in this way. This is the positive of behaving in that way. This is the future consequence of behaving in that way. Don't just throw a set of rules at them, explain why they're there and the benefit that it brings to them. Finally, I believe government approach, this is obviously more focused in terms of England, but the cash should go to school leaders to make decisions. That's my fundamental view. Head teachers, school leaders know their kids, they know their context. Mental health is a big issue that's emerging at the moment, but we cannot send every single kid to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counsellor. There isn't the capacity to do so. So I'd like to see some general medical backed advice on mental health strategies for some of the lower levels, some of the less severe situations, so hopefully we can resolve it before it does become much more severe. As already said, a shift in the narrative. We have to shift the narrative now to the positive, to moving forwards. Breakfast clubs, fundamentally back, it's in one of the EEF documents about catch up. Breakfast clubs, on average, 1 in 4 students will academically improve if you run a breakfast club. It improves learning and it reduces behaviour, backed by plenty of research. We've had reference to CO2 earlier. Continued ventilation, carbon dioxide in the classroom makes you tired, makes you drowsy, makes you lose concentration. So I believe that continued ventilation is going to be absolutely vital as well to keep the students focused. Humans are conformist. We want to do the things that are right. So let's keep making it cool and keep reinforcing the positives to help our students get things right. Thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions, more than happy to answer.
Daniel, bravo, thank you. Fantastic. Love the way you spoke about performing arts and with all of those positive things about building the culture and, healthy competition and having fun. Thank you so much for sharing those and also talking about the narrative. There were a few points made during your presentation. Fethi said we talk a lot about our students' behaviour and we forget about our teachers' behaviour. Thank you, Daniel, for mentioning coaching teachers and supporting them, which facilitates their tasks later and about their own learners. Thank you, Fethi, for sharing that. Ilham said, I love the idea of more than a job. So you've got another listener there, I think. Roxanne from Jamaica said, very practical points on behaviour. Emmanuel said, interesting observation about the new types of behaviour. Emmanuel also said she's not done catch up nor used that term as she's continued her lessons remotely or at school in order to provide continuity for students. Banashef said, brilliant point, so fruitful. And Rick Sand said, very interesting. Has anyone got a question that they'd like to ask Daniel or a point they'd like to put to him? I'm conscious, Daniel, of the time, and we're going to have another opportunity after the last speaker to come back, if you're able to stay with us. So we will come back to Daniel in a moment when we stop for questions. At this point, I just want to go over to David Muhindo in Uganda. Are you there, David? Oh, that's super. I'm just going to spotlight.
Hello.
That's great. Or Hannah,
Yes,
could you
please.
spotlight David for us, just so people can see him properly. But David, thank you for joining us. You're like our correspondent in East Africa this evening. And I'm just very interested, could you tell us a bit about the lockdown? You've gone back into lockdown, haven't you?
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. James. Mate, thank you for the opportunity given.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Here in Uganda, it is already 7:42 p.m. I thank you, Mr. James, for the work well done. And also I welcome the members present today.
Yeah.
Let me take you through the situation here in Uganda and how the lockdown is treating us here. Today, we are talking specifically about behavior and engagement, and I would like to talk about home studying learning right now. That we are just helping children. Some teachers are just moving. They are making outreaches to go and help the children. We are in a total lockdown. You are not moving. All transport means was suspended. So following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, government of Uganda closed all schools and other education institutions to minimize the spread of the coronavirus. This has affected more than 36,314 primary schools, 3,129 secondary schools, 430,778 teachers extra, and 12,777,390 learners are affected. The COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent close of all schools has had a drastically impacted on learning, especially curriculum coverage. Loss of interest in education and learners' readiness in case schools open is also another challenge here in Uganda. This could result in massive rates of learner dropouts due to unwanted pregnancies and the lack of school fees, among others. So to mitigate this, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on the education system in Uganda, the Ministry of Education and Sports constituted a sector response task force to strengthen the sector's preparedness and response measures. This task force and the National Curriculum Development Center developed a print home study learning materials, which we are now currently distributing to the children in the villages. We are also handling radio and television scripts for some selected subjects for all learners from pre-primary to advanced levels. These materials will enhance continued learning for progressions during this period of the lockdown, and will still be relevant when schools resume. The materials that you are distributing currently, they focus on critical competences in all subjects in the curricula to enable the learners to achieve without the teacher's guidance. Therefore, we are encouraging teachers to put more effort, and this effort should be made for all learners to access and use these materials during the lockdown. Similarly, teachers are advised to get these materials in order to plan appropriately for further learning when schools resume. While parents and guardians need to ensure that their children access copies of these materials and use them appropriately. I recognize the efforts as the assistant head teacher of Bombo Trinity. I do recognize the effort of National Curriculum Development Center and their development partners, for example, Save the Children, Uganda National Examination Board, the UNICEF, and the global partnerships for education in responding to this emergency through appropriate guidance and the timely development of these home study materials. I just wish to share this one with you this evening. Allow me to submit this to my fellow colleagues. Thank you for listening and thank you for your attention. Thank you, James.
No, that's fantastic. David, could you say any more about the behaviour as such before you went into lockdown? Was that any different in school?
Right, some behaviors we keep on reinforcing the SOPs, the standard day operation procedures. Some people, they pretend as if they are following them or as if they are observing them, but in most cases, we force children to sanitize themselves, to make a regular hand washing, to utilize the hand washing facilities that are put in place in most schools. Some of them even they are forced to put on their masks, even including teachers.
Yeah.
Almost my colleague Fra has already mentioned all my splitted behavior changes here in Uganda. Almost they are the same. The anxiety, the way children are not following the standard procedures here in Uganda. So almost we are trying here. The behaviors are not bad, but we keep on helping children to ensure that at least they cope up with the behavior changes. Thank you.
David, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I think at that point, thank you. What we will do is open up.
Welcome.
Thank you. We will open up to any questions or comments from colleagues about any of the speakers' presentations. Would anyone like to make a point? And that includes the speakers as well, who've been very patient this evening. Would anyone like to make a point? I see Bennett. Yes, sorry, Daniel, thank you for sharing your points. Also about the Breakfast Club, about having a really good start to the day is a helpful thing.
Yeah, I suppose just a point on that, if I can, James. So many students, we don't know what's going on at home, do we? We don't know what that experience is from 3 p.m. through to 8 p.m. the next morning, 8 a.m. the next morning, sorry.
Yeah.
And the Breakfast Club, it just gives you that chance. It's a chance to just get on top of things. It's a chance to be proactive before they come into school. Mm-hmm. When that student comes to school and they misbehave in the first lesson, well, they're probably not misbehaving because they don't like maths. Actually, they're probably misbehaving because their experience the past evening has been really rotten. Maybe something with a friend, maybe something with their home circumstances, maybe somebody's ill, etc., etc. And they come back to the point again to shamelessly plug. It's why it's more than a job. We're not just teaching them how to do maths, history, English, geography. We're actually educating the whole individual. We are creating the whole student. And that comes with everything. We are police, we are social workers, we are counsellors, we are guidance counsellors, we are careers advisors, we are dietitians, we are health experts. We have to teach them about every single thing possible, don't we? That's our job. And the Breakfast Club is a good way of getting them into school, a nice bit of organisation, a nice bit of structure, and it makes them feel special. Remember, ultimately, everybody wants to feel part of something. Humans are we're social creatures, and we crave that attention, we crave that community. And for some of those students, they don't have a community. They don't have a family that they can go to or a family that care. So sometimes you've got to be that family. And that's what I mean by the Breakfast Club. Bring them in early, sit down with them, have something to eat, cereal, slice of toast, but then talk to them, engage with them. And that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. It's a really good point. In my school, when I was a head teacher, sometimes the behaviour was because the children were hungry. They had not been fed. So we would take the child out of the class, give them, a piece of fruit and give them chance to sort of recover. It was a physiological thing. And maybe, Farah, that's just tying in with some of the points you were making about, the observational part, piece. Would you like to add anything to that about the welfare of the child in terms of their physiological state?
Well, I really believe in the Maslow's theory or hierarchy of needs. This is all about it, because if a child doesn't have access to clean water, a good night's sleep, food, and so on, which are the basic requirements of life, they're definitely going to act out. Yeah. Like I personally, when I'm very hungry, I personally get hangry. You know what I mean? So it's like it's the same with the children, I guess.
I thought it was just a man thing, but definitely agree with you. Definitely agree with you. Are there any other points? Any colleagues, either in the chat or would like to just share what they think? Fefi, did you have anything to say? I know you've made a lot of good points. Emmanuel made a lot of good points as well. And we are lucky this evening. We've had you know, colleagues from Canada as well, and the Philippines. Anyone else got a point they'd like to make?
Can I leave you one last point?
Yes, please.
James, before we wrap up?
Yeah.
I think this is really important. I scribbled this down on a piece of paper and I forgot to say it.
Do.
I think if we have one simple rule as educators, be who you needed when you were younger.
Yeah.
Leave it at that. Be who you needed when you were younger, and just think, what did you require when you were 11 to 16? Who did you need in your life? Be that person.
Really good points. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we're probably coming to an end now. I'm very grateful for points that have been made. We've had a terrific turnout this evening, and I think that's because of our speakers and the subject, because this is the core of the core for teachers. I think that Alina made that point really well earlier when she said that when we look for a job, you know, everyone here, everyone who's a teacher, as Daniel was saying, works over and above. But behaviour of a school, that can be a factor in deciding if you want to work at that school. So it's a real core issue, and I think that's reflected in the engagement that we've had this evening. Okay, well, on that point, I will thank our speakers one last time. I will say to everyone, do come back for our next conference. I'm going to go back to the video just to play us out, but the recording of this evening will be sent out to everyone as usual, and you'll be entitled to your certificates for attendance. Thank you very much, and good evening. Thank you.